I'm going to introduce you officially since you're already giving them such cool stuff.
Yeah.
This is Laura. Is it LaRue? But
yeah.
you go by Rue most of the time, don't
Yeah,
you?
yeah.
Yeah. So she's from one of my favorite places, most beautiful place in the world, which is Upper East Tennessee. Specifically, she's from Greenville. She went to ETSU, and she's got a degree in clinical health and rehabilitative science with a concentration in food science and nutrition. She currently works as a safety and health instructor, a first responder, an outdoor guide, and we know her as an optician, which is how we met her. So she's a busy girl. And I have a hard time believing this, but she has a child at GP that's a senior, a junior.
Junior.
I don't think she's old enough for that,
I
but
didn't either.
she does. But she likes to spend time with him, going to baseball games. She loves anything outside, camping, hiking, fishing, biking, kayaking. And she recently enjoyed making new friends and getting inspired by trying new brews at Iron Forge.
Yeah.
And I'm just excited. It just smells so good in here. So we're really excited that you come tonight. She has put a lot of work into this. I'm just so impressed with all you've done. So.
Well, now typically
So thank you.
what I have done, I appreciate it. Typically what I've done presentation-wise has been more on the food end, over an open flame. And obviously inside here in the library, we can't
We're not
have
saying
open
never.
flame.
We're not saying never. We're just gonna have
For
to
now?
tweak it a little bit, right? We might wait till it's warmer and do something else. We're working on it. Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, and it's a little chilly out there anyway.
Yeah.
But with that said, doing the beverages is a new facet, I guess, for me. I really enjoy doing the research, but unfortunately, because I am working the jobs that we mentioned earlier, I am going to have to read a little bit more than what I normally would. So I'm just going to apologize ahead of time. But hopefully, there's some good tidbits of information, and I really welcome participation, questions, anecdotes or whatever, as long as they're relevant to our material. First on tap, I would like to open up today by saying thank you to all the library folks and the locals here in Sevier County. I've worked as a contractor in the Blue Ridge corridor for the last 12 years. I travel a 500-mile radius that I used to teach health and safety classes, and I can tell you that our hospitality in this area is unmatched. I just want to thank you for everybody who's made me feel at home here. I've only lived in Sevier County for about 3 years, and that feeling is priceless. So I actually have lost, since Helene and COVID, I've lost several close family members. Probably the most primary is my father. And then I lived part-time with my grandmother, whom I also lost in the last little bit. Yes. Can you hear me? Can you still hear me?
Don't poke your eye out.
Yeah. So with that said, beverages and food are a big way that I feel like I can still connect with them. I feel like food and drink tell a story. So today I'm hoping with some of this tasting that you'll get a taste of that story. The history of drinks and beverages in Appalachia begins with Native Americans and early colonists enhancing various forms of water. So one of our first taste testing is actually going to be what they call cinnamon cooling water. And cinnamon is actually a natural sweetener. And when you taste this literally just cinnamon and water steeped. You'll actually be able to taste the sweetness of that cinnamon. And I actually use it in my coffee to cut back on my sugar. Cinnamon's also a natural vasodilator. So it helps with circulation as well. So in this way, it's going to be good for you. It's actually going to be this one right here. Yeah. And we can use these little cups for anybody who wants to try some. But
Anybody want to
yes.
try?
Honestly,
Don't give me
it's
a
to
lot.
your taste. This one has steeped 24 hours, but I treat it kind of like you would sun tea, where water that sits and doesn't have good closure and didn't get heated up tends to harbor a little more bacteria than something that's heated. So after about 24 to 48 hours, I throw it out, and it's just water.
How does cinnamon do you put it? Like cinnamon sticks?
I do, just cinnamon sticks. It depends on how poor I am at the time. You know, if I can buy Ceylon and, you know, lovely cinnamon sticks, I'll do cinnamon sticks. But, you know, if I'm paycheck to paycheck, I'll just do some powder. And that's, and I actually use that in my water bottles. It's also, and cinnamon is supposed to be antibacterial as well. However, I still throw it away after that 48. You'll notice it gets kind of a syrup to it. You can kind of see it at the top of the water. And when you go to drink that cooling water, it's sweet, and there's no sugar in it. It's weird, isn't it? How's it do that? Okay, so they would enhance various forms of water, eventually leading to teas, tonics, coffees, ciders, wines, and other forms of fermentation. And for the sake of today's presentation, I'm going to be focusing more on drink development and popularity during the 1800s. And it's going to be mostly non-alcoholic. I'll cover how we evolved into the alcohol, but there's plenty of distilleries out here that we can head there next. So one would assume in colonial America that people are drinking a lot of water and milk in the early 1800s, but that is actually not so much the case. Mostly in truth, because these liquids are common purveyors of disease and illness, especially sitting water, and milk in particular has to be kept cold in order to prevent the growth of pathogens and bacteria. So in the late 19th and 20th centuries, this has led us to pasteurization. I totally forgot I have a PowerPoint to go with this. But we didn't get that until, again, way late in the century. So pathogens can be found in a lot of your dairy products if it sits, or if the animal that you're taking milk from is exposed to something. It pass through that white blood cell and that lymph, which is ultimately what milk is, even though we don't think of it like that. Anyway, on farms it was safe to drink milk, mostly because it went straight from the cow till you drank it, and it didn't have to have that refrigeration period. However, in most cases, if you couldn't drink the milk right away, people would keep it as a byproduct. So rather than just drinking raw milk, people were cooking with it. So people still had a lot of dairy during that time period. They just had it as cheese, butter, cheese, butter, yogurt, simply to avoid that spoilage. And then, of course, another one, if we want, we can go get that, yeah. Another form of milk byproduct that we do drink still that kind of has a bit of a fermentation to it is going to be buttermilk, was popular here. And I apologize if you hear me breathing. So that's page one. Buttermilk was preferred, especially in the South, because of how it enhances food. And it is a probiotic, and it gives milk a longer shelf life compared to what we call sweet milk or raw milk. Since the transportation of fresh milk was the main issue, brewers, when we started making beer and we started having bigger cities, brewers would actually attach dairy farms to beer manufacturing, and they would be feeding these cows this leftover mash, or what they call swill, and that is where we get this really horrible milk product where people were getting sick off of the milk from the cow because the cow was already sick. So really not a good situation. At best, they produced very poor quality milk and spread diseases. The biggest one was cholera at the time. The average person during that time period consumed less than 1/3 of a pint of milk a day, and most of this was through cooking in coffee, tea, or chocolate. So if we want, anyone who wants to do, have some buttermilk, if it's been a little minute since you've had it straight, you are welcome to try some buttermilk. Most people have this exact reaction as you in the back. You're like, nope, I've had it, I know it.
I'm good.
I love buttermilk.
Oh,
You can
Some
actually,
people do.
and with a hoe cake, again, you're welcome to pair those two together. But know that if you want some buttermilk, yeah, cheers.
It makes the best cornbread.
I have to include,
No.
what's it they say? You have to have the bitter to appreciate the sweet.
That's true.
What did you say?
I said it makes the best cornbread and biscuits.
It does.
It does.
So if you don't like it for drinking,
No, but
here's
for
to having
baking,
it for
I do.
cooking. Okay, so we covered milk, water. Water was also largely unsafe to drink in common areas without treatment or filtration. Spring water is highly valued because it's purest from the source. Okay, so they actually would value land based on its proximity to water back then, and even now, still today, I think that there is some validity to that. So if you had a spring on your property where you could source, the purest of the pure water, you were considered a rich man. Not only that, but a spring or a creek would provide cooling. So it was kind of an early form of refrigeration, if you will. Here in these pictures, you can see this is a spring house, not an outhouse, built over that water. And typically you'd go inside and they would have channeled the fluid around in the spring house so that you could store dairy, butter, meats of some kinds, but mostly we were preserving meats with smoke and salt. So, but anyway, so you keep your goods that would be refrigerated in there back before there was refrigeration. Stagnant water can be dangerous because it provides a better incubator than running water for infectious pathogens. And oftentimes it can be contaminated with feces, especially from animals, particularly in areas with low rainfall. I know we don't like to think about this, but back then they didn't even consider it, and it's going to lead to some unfortunate statistics here in just a second. So water stagnation for as little as 6 days can completely change bacterial community composition and increase cell counts. Not to mention that larvae and eggs thrive in that type of environment as well, leading to higher chances of malaria and dengue depending on where you are. In fact, the leading cause of death during the Civil War was not combat, but instead was from diseases and illnesses from contaminated groundwater, leading to things like diarrhea, dysentery, typhoid, and pneumonia. Prior to the Civil War, a large outbreak of cholera had broken out as a result of poor sanitation in crowded areas of the country. With the Civil War, they contributed a lot of it as people weren't getting far enough out of camp before using the restroom, and then they were using the same water in that area. Which, gosh, you think nowadays it's so common sense, but just back then they didn't think about it. Colonists on rural farms or on the frontier could find natural, clean sources of water, or they could dig a well for fresh water. But colonists in a city, they would drink bottled water from the countryside. So they would ship it in. City dwellers use bodies of water for garbage disposal, not for drinking. So if they just slaughtered a pig, they would throw the carcass in the river. If they needed to empty their chamber pot, dump it in the well. In defense of the colonists, they did not know about germs and bacteria. They could, however, clearly recognize clean water from dirty water. But clean water was only available outside the city. So this would have been a problem if the tea water trade hadn't blossomed. So here is, these are the dairy cows I was talking about. This is kind of a cartoon of one of these breweries that had, where they were feeding the cows right outside the, yes. And so this is literally a drunk cow getting milked, and you're gonna drink the milk. So, you can do the math there. So you can tell based on certain types of vegetation around water can tell you whether it's clean water or not. Same thing, you've heard the adage, if a horse drinks from the water, it's safe to drink. So there's definitely, and of course, going to the spring, you're getting it as close to the source as you can get. You know that it's going to be cleaner. But this is a photograph, a very early photograph of one of the first water dispensers. They used to bring it just like they would bring, the milkman would bring milk, they would bring water. And initially, water was bottled because they thought it was more on the medicinal side. So tea water was clean water, usually found on the outskirts of a city, and it was primarily used for making tea, though it was safe to drink alone. Workers known as tea watermen drew the water, sealed it in kegs, and then transported it into the city. Having this bottled water delivered cost about 45 shillings a day, and today that's about $310. But in the late colonial era, it took the average tradesman 1 month to earn that much money. So you can imagine not everybody had tea water. It's probably more for the elite. This practice of bottling water began in Boston, Massachusetts in 1767 from a mineral spring in Jackson Spa. This particular bottled water was said to have therapeutic properties, like it contained minerals such as sulfur, magnesium, and things that are good for tissue and joint health. This also led to more widespread bottling. You know, everybody could bottle the water if you had bottles. It wasn't so much for sanitary consumption as it was for medicinal practice. The late 19th and 20th centuries have seen a rise to widespread filtration and chlorination of public water sources. So the first primitive measures to filter water was by using charcoal from fires and heat treatment. And then later, this expanded to the use of sand and gravel as media filtering. The first city to adopt public water filtering was Jersey City in 1908. So you can see, and here's the guy with this horse here.
Yeah.
This was during the Civil War. I apologize, I've not kept up with my slides here. Apparently, it was practiced on both sides of the war, that if someone was using the bathroom, because it was so common, that you never shoot or you never engage in combat when someone's using the restroom. And then you can see here, there's just, the internet is littered with pictures of people that just got so skinny, and largely it just was from, you're not absorbing any nutrients if you're going to the bathroom that much. So, not a good situation. There's the old Civil War first aid kit. It's got some pretty primitive, you can see this, the big saw here. But then they also had things to treat, especially pneumonia. Sorry, can you still hear me? It's cutting in and out.
There you go.
Oh, it's this side.
Yeah, there you go.
As long as you don't hear me breathing too much. Okay.
Some crazy looking stuff.
Yeah. So this is actually a public water, a sanitary water or tea water station. So if you lived in a city, you might be able to access one of these and fill up your own tea water. So they call that tea water pump. And here is, I thought these were kind of interesting. These are some primitive water filtration systems. And then again, later in the early 1900s when it started becoming public or industrial. But on a farm or personally, like if you had a cabin, this might be how you would set up your water source so that it's getting that filtration, so that you get clean water. Because without the foundation, all this other stuff is contaminated. Okay, so the first laws for federal drinking water standards were put into effect in 1914, but national standards did not come into effect until 1970, y'all.
Oh
Wow.
my. Oh my, that is terrible.
That's recent.
That's my day.
Which is pretty recent. You're saying.
So it was just state by state? until
Yeah. And the problem was now all these systems are dated, or they used metal piping that is not safe. So we're having to redo all these water systems now based on these new standards, and we are a little behind. But yeah, I thought 1970s, so I was like, whoa, that wasn't that long ago. So the story behind each colonial beverage is packed with details about colonial life. And it's hard to imagine that something so small as what someone drank 250 years ago can have such meaningful and revealing ties to history at large. So the next sampling, or it's not a sampling, the next drink we're going to cover, and we're going to get into some teas for anybody who wants to try them, is going to be a drink called Yopon tea. And this is the picture. It's spelled kind of funny. So I looked up the pronunciation, that's why I put it on there, but it's Yopon tea. And the native people of North America drank various herbal teas, but the most common of which was Yopon tea, known as the beloved drink, Cassina, or white drink. It was brewed from the Yopon holly. So I'm going to go back here. It was brewed from this holly, and it's native to the Atlantic and Gulf Coast, and it's a relative to what we know as yerba mate now. So Native American tribes like the Chickasaw, the Cherokee, the Choctaw, the Muskogee use this tea as a daily drink, as a social drink used in meetings, and in various rituals, many of which are associated with purification. Yopon tea was adopted by European colonists as early as the 17th century, who gave it various names like black drink, Carolina tea, South Seas tea, or Indian tea. And Yopon's really kind of interesting. It's known for providing energy and promoting well-being due to its high caffeine and theobromine content, which can enhance endurance and boost your mood. It has about 1/3 of the caffeine of coffee. But if you've never had coffee, then that's a lot of caffeine. It's also rich in antioxidants like polyphenols and flavonoids, and they have anti-inflammatory properties as well that reduce chronic conditions like heart disease, diabetes, and potentially cancer. The tea contains a compound that may also support brain health, immune function, and weight management. And that's that theobromine and the saponins that are in it. So, Yopon is the only native U.S. plant to have naturally occurring caffeine, and the presence of theobromine, also found in dark chocolate, can improve mood, support sustained energy levels, and it also helps relax your blood vessels, which can ease blood flow, which is good for endurance. Saponins in the tea support the immune system and help to lower cholesterol. Unfortunately, I did not have enough organization, I don't want to say time because we had plenty of time, to get this in. But I really, you can't find it around here. I looked. Definitely you can find yerba mate, but I didn't get to have us try this. But I would have loved for this to be one of the things that we all got to sample. So, moving on. I'm actually going to let you all try some of the teas I've brought today. So give me just a second, and we'll dole out some of this. So I have, what's that? I have, this one's a cold tea that we're going to have.
This
but
one?
these two are the warm ones. So if you want, let's do the warm one.
Okay.
And I got this.
Do we need little cups or you have the size cup?
Either one I think would be okay. Let's do the little waxy one.
This one?
And I apologize, my tea bag broke in there, so it's a little ugly looking. Let's see if this will pour out for us. Oh, nope, it's not gonna do it. Let's see. This one, yeah, it's still got pulp in it. Y'all can drink around the pulp here.
Yeah, pulp is not a bad thing, right?
Sorry.
It's not.
This is also warm.
Let me come around.
It's got, this one has elderberry, it's got some apple pieces in it. So the pulp is actually not tea leaf, it's fruit. I was trying to keep it out of there for you, but my
Okay,
bag.
did you get one?
So there, again, there's no sugar in this, it's just the tea.
Did you get one yet?
Yes, I got one.
Okay, who's next? Here we go.
Smells great.
It's on the bitter side.
What was in this one again?
This one is an elderberry and apple.
Berry and apple.
Mom made elderberry pies.
Did you mix this?
What's that?
Did you mix the tea? It's good.
Any more? We got more?
They love your tea.
1, 2. This breaks it up a little. Again, anybody who needs a little break up in flavor, you're welcome to a hoe cake.
I'm gonna try one anyway.
Okay, here we go. Let's have the first one.
We do have a trash can for anybody who needs it or wants it. That one is elderberry and apple. It's got a black tea in it as well.
Is that where the trash can is back there? Oh, I've got it for you. Okay. I'm gonna try one of these.
You're probably, if it tastes sweet, it's probably from the apple. And the elderberry is also a little sweet as well.
You didn't really get all mixed up.
So true Asian tea was, do we still need more? You are welcome to.
I'll get it. We just need.
So true Asian tea was first brought to North America by Dutch traders in the 17th century. The Dutch colony of New Amsterdam, also known as New York now,
Oh, gosh, yes.
they served the best
That's one.
silver strainers, the finest porcelain cups and pots, and wooden tea caddies. So actually their setup was much nicer than what I have here today. So sorry it's a little on the primitive side. I had to keep what could drive in the car. So regular shipments of tea to the American colonies began in the 1720s. And legally, American colonists were only supposed to buy British tea by law. But in reality, smuggling was widespread, and Dutch, French, and other teas were widely available. So they were working their way around all that. Asian tea soon became a very popular drink in the American colonies, and tea parties were common among all classes. The first tea vendors in Boston were Benjamin Harris and Daniel Vernon in 1690 in Salem. And there they would take tea leaves that were boiled, strain them out, mix them with butter, and serve them as a side dish like you would a vegetable. So that's kind of weird. I thought it was interesting. By the time of the American Revolution, tea was drunk everywhere from the backwoods to the city, so it became very prevalent. The view of tea in American culture, though, began to shift when the British government, in the Townshend Acts, 1767, tea was taxed as part of those laws, which made it less affordable for the colonial population. However, cheaper tea was still smuggled into America, and later in 1773, the Tea Act was put into place, which allowed the East India Company to gain monopoly on tea sales in America. So, and they were able to sell at prices that were cheaper than colonial tea importers, and they were able to sell cheaper than smugglers. This infuriated American colonists and led to the Boston Tea Party, where 90,000 pounds of East India tea were dumped into the Boston harbor. We all remember that story. As news spread, tea was destroyed throughout the colonies, so they didn't just do it one time. Multiple cities followed suit, and they even began burning tea in Greenwich, New Jersey, in Market Square. So you can see this picture is actually them dressed up. It's a painting of them dressed up burning the tea in Market Square, and these were all the folks that participated. So It then became, as a consequence of these acts and the American Revolution, tea drinking became seen as unpatriotic. So, for those of you who need an excuse to have coffee, here you go. Boycotts of tea by revolutionary patriots led to an increase in consumption of other beverages, such as coffee, the yopon tea, herbal teas infused with peppermint, sage, or dandelions. And I'm not going to make it today, but anybody who would like to take home, having dandelion leaf or root tea is a acquired taste. And it's expensive. So if you want to take a bag home to try without having to buy, you're welcome to take home a sample. Okay? In spite of the distaste for tea that was fueled by the revolution, tea continued to be used by Americans, especially after the war. Okay, so tea's still going hard. For example, George Washington regularly had tea for breakfast and dinner. In the English fashion, and American merchants Samuel Shaw and Robert Morris sent the first merchant ship to China. They were just going to go get it themselves, known as the Empress of China. And soon, Chinese tea was being shipped to America by American vessels. So they're starting to go get it themselves. Thomas Sullivan is credited with inventing tea bags in 1908. Sullivan was a New York tea importer, and inadvertently he sent out samples of his teas in little silk sachets for people to try using their own little tea cage. And what happened was people didn't realize they were supposed to use their own device and actually boiled the little silk bag and enjoyed it. They thought it was cleaner and nicer. In fact, they were so impressed with the silk bag that they were not interested in buying his wholesale bulk tea. They wanted the bag. So he capitalized on that, and eventually it became unpractical to make silk tea bags because it was too expensive. So they switched to gauze, and later on they ended up inventing the paper fiber. So actually the American tea bag is an invention from here. After Commodore Perry opened up trade with Japan in 1854, Japanese green tea became the bulk of America's tea imports. So, right up to the Industrial Revolution, we're switching to green tea now. The 19th century saw the rise of iced tea, especially in the South. And one of the earliest recipes for American iced tea appeared in Housekeeping in Old Virginia from a cookbook in 1879 is the oldest tea recipe we could find. Alcoholic iced tea punches with cream, sugar, and liquor also became popular in the 19th century, especially in towns like Charleston and Savannah. So these are some of the benefits of the dandelion tea. It has a diuretic effect naturally. So if you're on hydrochlorothiazide, this is the holistic version of that. Blood sugar regulation, it's like a cinnamon in that it helps with that. Liver support, nutrient rich, and of course all your plants seem to be antioxidant rich. And then elderberry has a lot of those same properties too. And you can see here's some different types of tea bags. This is actually a picture of Paul Revere. He was a metalsmith, and I don't know if you've ever heard of Revere ware to cook with, but here he is with his own tea kettle. So I thought that was pretty neat. And then just a menu of tea offerings from one of the wholesalers that we talked about earlier. These are some of the iced tea punches. These iced tea drinks resemble the modern sweet bourbon punch and Long Island iced tea. Fish House punch, which is rum, cognac, and peach brandy, was also often diluted with tea. So the 19th century also saw the growth of various tea companies like the Great American Tea Company, the Atlantic and Pacific, and the Oriental Tea Company. So we're getting really big into tea. And during the hot days of the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis, iced tea became the most popular drink at the fair among its 20 million visitors. So this was a major moment in the rise of popularity of American iced tea. Prohibition also saw the rise of non-alcoholic iced teas as clubs, hotels, and other venues sought to restock their drink menus with other strong, flavorful drinks. The introduction of the home refrigerator also made it easier to have iced tea at home. So up until World War II, Americans drank equal amounts of green and black tea. But the war cut off green tea shipments from China and Japan, so Americans turned to the mostly black tea traded by the British Empire from India and Sri Lanka. So after World War II, 99% of the tea in America was black. So today, I'm going to go ahead and get it started with the sampling. This is my inspiration for doing all of this. My grandmother always would make spearmint tea. And so today I have made a version of that for you all to try. That's going to be the red top. And you might have to twist it. And there is spearmint in there, so you'll want to be on the strainer side of it. One more. Yeah, perfect. So this one is sweet. I did sweeten it the way I made it, just like she would have made it for me and all my cousins. Just every time we went to her house, there was always a jug of this somewhere. So it is by far my favorite beverage. I actually had a conversation today with somebody, and we were talking about why soft drinks are called soft drinks. And the person I was talking to was like, oh, well, it's because they're not hard, meaning they're not alcoholic.
Wow.
So this is where we're starting to see that shift in trend. And yeah, I was like, duh. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, soft drinks. So technically, tea is a soft drink as long as there's no alcohol in it. But the American specialty tea market has quadrupled in the years from 1993 to 2008, and now being worth over $6.8 billion a year. So specialty tea houses and retailers also started to pop up in the late 1900s. Sun tea is frequently brewed by placing tea and room temperature water together in a glass, and you just leave it outside for hours. I don't prefer this method because I always want my tea in a hurry. But if you have several hours to spare, sun tea is a very low energy way to approach, imbuing herbs into water, or infusing rather. Since sun brewing occurs in a temperature range that can promote the development of bacteria, the CDC does recommend you throw it out after a certain amount of time. Sweet tea is ubiquitous in the southeastern United States, and the consumption of sweet tea with many meals leads to it sometimes being called the table wine of the South. And this trait is considered an important marker of the culture of the southern United States. Southern sweet tea is made by brewing tea at double strength, adding a large amount of sugar to the freshly brewed tea, and then diluting it to the proper strength. It's served over a glass full of ice cubes and garnished sometimes with a slice of lemon. I often feel like Americans adding sugar, lemon, and ice is also another form of retaliation against the British. Other forms of iced tea popular in the United States nowadays include iced tea with lemonade, also known as the Arnold Palmer, or iced tea lattes, bubble tea, and fruit infusions. So today, I also have, if anybody, afterwards, if there's something you want more of, you're welcome to help yourself, but I did make some basil lemonade, so that's going to be infused with some herbs. You're welcome to combine or mix and match or drink by itself, whatever you want to up here. That's tea.
What kind of mint did you put in?
That is spearmint.
It's very like just the drops.
No, it is.
The leaf.
I grew it on my patio. It's weird. I bought some mint, and I never can. The mint that I buy never tastes quite like my grandmother's.
Yeah.
So, and it has a purple stem, spearmint.
Yes.
I bought some at Lowe's, and it's just never quite the same. That's the purple stem that I really like with that spearmint. So actually, when she passed away, we sold her estate, and I realized I'd moved, and I didn't have any of her mint, so I went in the night and dug some up.
Go girl. Yeah, go girl.
Because it's it's a perennial, so they'll get more, and that way I could still have some. But I'm trying to my best to keep her little plant alive to get it to somewhere where I can grow it in plenty.
So this is the basil.
That's the basil lemonade. For anyone who wants to try that now, you certainly can, but that's going to be the basil lemonade. So on to coffee, and we are a good ways in. We've got coffee, there's going to be cider, and then we'll get into some alcoholic beverages, and we'll wrap up. So if your back end needs a break, it'll be very soon. So second only to oil, coffee is the most valuable legally traded commodity in the world. We love it, we rely on it, and we drink it in massive quantities. And by we, I'm speaking for at least myself, okay? It's estimated that 2.25 billion cups of coffee are consumed each day worldwide. So this is sun tea. Sorry, my bad. This is sun tea right here. You can see, so someone's infusing, this is probably a green tea with herbs of some kind, maybe mint. And then this one is just your basic sun tea. So all you have to do is throw your sachet in a jar that gets sunlight or gets warm, and let it sit and do its thing. And then if it's too strong, you water it down. Most of the time, though, for me, sun tea is not strong enough. Yeah, I like things a little on the bitter side, and then I add all the sugar.
Have you ever had hemlock tea?
No, but it sounds good.
So it has no flavor. It's like hot water, but the smell is amazing. So if you're like hiking in the wintertime and you want
Find
your
some?
water, well, you can make it, but ounce for ounce, it has the same amount of vitamin C as an orange. And the Native Americans in Cherokee, they used to use it in these mountains in the winter.
Very
So it's a
nice.
fun
This is
fact.
good.
Some hemlock. That's the basil lemonade. Good.
I love it.
I love me some basil.
I'm sorry, did you say the sun tea?
No, it's called hemlock, from
Oh,
the
yeah.
hemlock tree.
Yeah.
But you gotta be careful to make sure you get hemlock and not poisonous hemlock.
There's a
This is
difference.
really.
I was gonna ask. Yeah, you gotta be you gotta know what you're getting, but ounce for ounce, it's got the same amount of vitamin C as an orange. And it has no flavor, but the aroma is, and you can mix it with another tea.
Oh yeah, yeah. That, I feel like that would be good with like lemon or citrus in there too. Coffee plants reached the New World during the 18th century, though the drink wasn't really popular until after the Boston Tea Party, as we talked about. So that was 1773. And making the switch from tea to coffee became somewhat of a patriotic duty. So during the Civil War, yeah, you got to do your part for Uncle Sam. The Civil War and other conflicts that followed also helped to increase coffee consumption, as soldiers relied on the caffeine for a boost of energy and for warmth. Coffee was then associated with patriotism in the United States to the point that Teddy Roosevelt himself is counted among America's greatest coffee drinkers due to his rumored consumption of a gallon of coffee a day.
Wow.
Can I interject one little thing?
I wonder how often he peed. Yes.
Yeah, no kidding. So also, he liked hot chocolate too. We have his hot chocolate jug out here in our presidential collection. So he did like hot chocolate as well. Just thought I'd throw that in there.
Man after my own heart.
Right?
So Roosevelt is also said to have coined Maxwell House's famous "Good to the Last Drop" slogan after being served the coffee at Andrew Jackson's historical home in the Hermitage in Tennessee. So by the late 1800s, coffee had become a worldwide commodity, and entrepreneurs began looking for new ways to profit from this beverage. So in 1864, Charles and John Arbuckle, they were two brothers from Pittsburgh, purchased a newly invented self-emptying coffee bean roaster. So what was happening is green beans were being, or green peas, is Peabody coffees when it's green, were imported into the United States, and then we would roast it here because we are not particularly a great coffee growing region, as you've probably come to, learn. But here is an industrial coffee roaster, and the Arbuckles began selling pre-roasted coffee in paper bags by the pound. So they named their coffee Ariosa and found great success in selling it to the cowboys of the American West. And it wasn't long before James Folger followed suit and began selling coffee to the gold miners in California. So this blazed the trail for several other big-name coffee producers, including Maxwell House and Hills Brothers. So today I do have a French press that we just have to add water to. So if we want, we can get that boiling, and for anyone who wants a little cup of coffee, it is, with the daylight savings, I'm not sure even if that clock is right, but it's pretty late for coffee, so it's just a very small French press, but for anyone who wants it, there is coffee. Next, which we've all already started to partake in, is cider. So America's stuck with cider and whiskey because they were alcoholic. So kind of the first two real beverages people were drinking here were cider and whiskey and beer as well, because we knew they were sanitary because they had that alcohol in them. So alcohol-based drinks typically wouldn't spread disease, and they had a much longer shelf life. Apple trees were not native to North America, and the colonists had to bring trees with them aboard ship to the New World. And because apple trees are not native, neither were the insects to pollinate them, so honeybees were also brought in. So the story of Johnny Appleseed spreading apple trees wherever he went is true to some degree. He was actually a missionary named Jonathan Chapman who planted apple nurseries across the Midwest. And other pioneers took apple trees across the nation, even on the Oregon Trail. So I just put this in and then plunge it, right? Is it hot? Did that get hot? Okay, yeah. You just put it in and we'll let it sit and then plunge it. At 7 minutes it has to sit. So these are cowboys drinking coffee. And this is early cider press. So the difference between apple juice and apple cider is pulp. So apple juice, they would have filtered out all of that fiber and all that pit, and you would have a much more purified version, versus the cider is going to be, the good stuff there. And then, of course, hard cider is going to be once it ferments. Cider was America's most popular drink. A typical family of 6 would drink about 90 gallons of cider a year. That's about 15 gallons per person. That's a lot of cider. It was brought by English colonists who established these orchards, and it was a good way to preserve your apple harvest. So if things were going bad, you could turn your apples into apple cider and thus keep them and keep that nutrient density. It was used as a way to pay taxes, wages, and tithes, and the byproduct vinegar was used for food preservation and cleaning. Political candidates, including George Washington, used hard cider to motivate voters and build popularity. Bribery. Its decline was caused by the Industrial Revolution, the influx of European immigrants who preferred beer, and most significantly, the Prohibition. So we're starting to creep into that era. Prohibition devastated the industry for decades after. So today, I have a sampling of what we call switchel. This is the most probably interesting and far out sampling that I have brought. But switchel is considered medicinal. It's also a digestive aid. They used it to help. It's kind of like one of the first Gatorades, so to speak. It encouraged hydration. So a lot of people, they call this haymaker's punch, because farmers, after a long day out in the sun, this would replenish electrolytes. So that's the one in the green, and the second that you tilt it, it comes out. It comes out. This is an acquired. We might need to stir it.
Okay.
This one should be clean. And you'll have to pull the green thing out. This piece.
Oh, on the lid.
Yeah. Sorry. It's actually.
Oh, that worked.
Yeah. Sorry. And don't push it down too fast because it'll just push it all out.
It's a very high maintenance picture.
Sorry. Yeah. Well, I was running out of good pictures. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're
All my coworkers donated a picture.
So I can get it out, actually.
If we need to, we can use one of these to put it.
Yeah.
It kind of looks like a glove. Okay. So, and if not, it can be served, not stirred, but it would be best stirred. The Industrial Revolution led to people moving from farms to cities, where many orchards were left behind. It also made beer an easier to distribute beverage. So it also made beer more accessible because people were moving to the city. So, and this wave of European immigrants, particularly from Germany, Ireland, and Scotland, brought with them a strong preference for beer, especially in this area. So that was a cheaper alternative to cider. So the 18th Amendment, ratified in 1919, made alcohol illegal, dealing a devastating blow to the cider industry, and many orchards were destroyed and production came to a standstill. And it was much easier for breweries to ramp up production rather than for cider makers to regrow orchards. So they just got kind of replaced over time. And many apple farmers switched to growing culinary apples for fresh consumption instead of for hard cider. And in recent decades, cider has seen a revival fueled by renewed interest in craft beverages, local products, and the heritage of American food and drinks. So luckily, we're seeing all this make a comeback now. This is known as, they call it switchel. They also call it swizzle, haymaker's punch. A lot of these drinks have multiple names. So just be aware of that. Wine. Historically, residents made a variety of homemade fruit and botanical wines, such as dandelion wine, elderberry wine, and scuppernong, which is kind of like a muscadine. Commercial winemaking was impacted by Prohibition, but has seen a resurgence in years with a focus on both traditional and new grape varieties. So I'm going to keep moving forward on this. This picture is the oldest cider mill still standing. And that's the switchel.
What is this?
Switchel is actually, it's a ginger and vinegar base. Yeah.
Like salad, like a vinaigrette.
It kind of tastes like drinking a vinaigrette. Yes, it's a very good. It's sweetened with, this one is sweetened with honey, but some people sweeten it with maple syrup. And it's actually used medicinally. Another one that I could have made, but for the sake of us all not getting diarrhea, they make what's called pepper tea, and it has cayenne added. And switchel does not have cayenne, and I did not include any varieties today with cayenne, but I did bring it to show you that people use cayenne. I do not use cayenne in drinks. It's really great. It's actually, it has a thermogenic effect, so it is fat burning to a degree and does literally keep you warm. Okay? So, before Prohibition, many Appalachians made homemade wines from that native grape called the scuppernong. A recipe for parsnip wine requires parsnips to be dug up in February and is documented as part of our region's heritage. So, parsnips, that's kind of almost like a turnipy situation. I can't imagine a wine made out of that, but yeah. I'm trying to think, maybe it's like a martini. I don't know. I can't. I just can't. I can't.
With a kick.
That and ramp wine.
Oh, no.
They're going to smell it for days.
Yeah.
Agreed. They also did pokeberry or elderberry wine, and folk medicine dictated that was also good for your rheumatism. So we had this one would be your arthritis drink. On top of this, Appalachia was the birthplace of a patent medicine product called wine of Cardui. And it was marketed to women as one of the first treatments for cramping. And it was actually invented by Union soldiers who opened a business in Chattanooga. So it is a Tennessee derived, this one's pear wine. My brother, he's made wine and moonshine out of persimmon, and it actually wasn't terrible. He finds stuff on the side of the road, or like we'll go hiking, and he's like, "Let me see what I can do with this." One we like that I couldn't find in enough time, and it doesn't bloom this time of year anyway, is tea berry. Tea berries are really delicious, just hot water while you're hiking, deliciousness. So this wine of Cardui, I think it's really funny. because it's a non-intoxicating female tonic for despondent women. So anyway, yeah, the verbiage there. I'm definitely a despondent woman at times, so. Anyway, know that this wine of Cardui would cure what ails you, you know. I could just imagine somebody carting this around and selling it, you know, like carpet bagging. Anyway, European settlers brought grape growing and winemaking to Tennessee in the mid-1800s. And by the late 1800s, vineyards were flourishing, with Tennessee being one of the largest grape growing states in the nation. And we don't have a ton of grape growing here, so if we're the number one in that area at the time, that's really saying something. But Prohibition significantly impacted that industry, and it caused a lot of wineries to close as well and switch to producing non-alcoholic soft drinks produced like raisins, and they also would switch to making grape juice. Figures like Francis Estelle Beecham, a native of Kentucky and an advocate for the anti-liquor crusade, was also prominent at this time. So here is a picture of, we're getting into Prohibition causing a lot of issues. This was known as the Dry Decade. 1920, I believe, to 1933. A little over a decade. But you know, it really changed things, especially the culture in our area, because we're getting ready to be known for, you know, our white lightning. Like it says, stock up now, soon there'll be nothing but the lake. And this gal here, she's
She got a flask.
toting her little flask, and her, you know, that's somebody's, you know, grandma. Heck yeah.
Grandma had one.
Yeah. This is the Frances Beecham from Kentucky. You know, she was encouraging people to drink a little less and instead use these grapes for good, in her perspective. So there was people, you know, on both sides of, we want our county to be dry, no, we want our county to be wet. And of course, we've actually almost kind of recently seen that as a county. So we're still seeing some trickle down of some of that mindset.